Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's conversation about Represent. And we have filmmaker Hillary Bachelder. Bachelor, I'll butcher your last name, that's fine. Welcome, and let me just give you a quick synopsis of the film. Equal parts personal and political, Represent interweaves the stories of three women on both sides of the aisle and share singular goal of improving their community through public service, and elevates both the systematic failings and the unsung heroes at the heart of our smallest elections, which I love how this is a small election story with big picture, goals. Hillary, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I love this film, and it's funny being a president of a nonprofit. We talk and harp on that all politics is local, local, local. But I love the stories that you've woven here. First of all, give us how you came to this film. How did you find the story?
Yeah. So this kind of started pretty quickly after the 2016 election. And I kind of hearken the genesis of it back to being in the booth on election day. And so, my name's Hillary Bachelder, and it's not that it had never occurred to me that Hillary Clinton and I shared a name, but got there to this, very unglamorous little voting booth in like the elementary school that was our precinct. And just started like sobbing hysterically because I was like, oh my God, her name's Hillary and my name's Hillary. And that like, tiny, very, random form of representation still felt really impactful in that moment. And so after the election, kind of we all know what came next. But I started seeing these very small news stories about how these organizations that exist to train women to run for office had gotten like 1,000 applications overnight. So like way, way before there was kind of like this whisper of the pink wave, the year of the woman in 2018, it was like the day after the 2016 election, women were signing up to run for office. And so I started seeing those and going to these trainings. And it was pretty clear from very early on that it was like, oh, this is a moment and this is a movement. And, the Women's March happened soon after that. And I was like, this is something that I would like to be kind of in at the ground level for. So I started filming in early 2017. And then we really filmed through 2019.
Well, did you happen to go to the Women's March?
Just the one in Chicago, which is where I live, but.
That's the pink wave. Talk a little bit about, you open the film with this footage of, oh, this is the year of the woman. This is the year of the woman. No, this is the year of the woman. Talk a little bit about that and this concept of women having a moment.
Yeah, I wanted to sort of set the stage for the film by saying, not trying to undermine the power and importance of women organizing. And we certainly have had these like moments of strength and unity and progress. But it did feel like deja vu when I was doing this research to see the first clip of the film is 1974 Walter Cronkite saying, this is the year of the women. And then, he goes to another reporter who's like, problems solved, like women did it. And so I was like, well, that's not great. If we keep thinking that this is something that is going to be fixed by a lot, by really great and passionate women getting out there and running for office, that's fantastic, but it's such a larger systemic problem, and it's too tidy and too neat when we put it in this box of you're the woman. Okay, now we can all relax. We got it sorted. So I wanted to set up our audience with that in mind, to be reflecting on how can we make this, I mean, it's less glamorous, it's less flashy, but like this has to be a sustained movement. This has to be ongoing progress where we chip away at these problematic systems. And it can't just look like a few really rad women who are kind of busting their butts. We all have to be engaged to make this sustainable.
That was kind of a laugh out loud moment when that goes over to the reporter, like, okay, great. you know? Yeah, I think just it very much so highlighted that, yeah, this problem is not solved, still is not solved. There's lots going on. You have three women that you follow, Maya, Julie, and Bryn. How did you find these women to tell their stories?
Yeah, so I found Maya first. And this was when I sort of decided that I wanted to make a film on this subject in the space. It's very kind of a basic thing, but I set up a Google alert for women in politics that I still have to this day. So like 4 p.m. every day, I get my little Google News. Yeah, and she announced that she was going to run for mayor of Detroit in like January of 2017, because that's in Detroit. It was an off-year election for mayor. And so, as you can imagine, there was a little bit of local and some national press that was like, look at this really incredible 22-year-old who just said she was going to run for mayor. So I kind of reached out to her based on that, and then ended up driving out to Detroit I think probably the next week, to do an interview and a little bit of shooting. And it just was so clear to me that she was both so exceptional, but also so relatable and kind of down to earth. And I connected with her a lot because I was actually only a few years older than she was at the time. And so I was like, oh, I really vibe on this, like graduating from college and not knowing what the heck you're doing next with your life moment that I also found interesting in her story. So that's how I connected with Maya. With Bryn, I actually got connected because I was going to these trainings, and I ended up going to a training in Wisconsin that was specifically for women farmers who were thinking about running for office. And I just loved being in that room and meeting all the women there. Yeah. And unfortunately, none of them were kind of ready to make that leap in that moment. And so I was like, please put out the notice to anyone in your networks. Like, I want a farmer. I want to film someone like mucking a stable. I think that's a thing you do as a farmer. And then like going to a town meeting. And so it got sort of disseminated in these farming networks. And then I actually got an email from Bryn that was like, 4 different people have emailed this to me. You know, I think I'm the person that you're looking for, which I loved. And I've tried to remind her of since, when she gets really tired of me showing up to keep filming things. I'm like, you reached out to me, dude. So yeah, so that was how I connected with Bryn. I love it when people find you with their stories. Right. Makes my job so much easier. And then with Julie, I really knew that I wanted to find a Republican woman. And in part, that was a little bit more difficult because all of this momentum and excitement for this kind of year of the woman in 2018 was around, was coming from the Democratic Party and all these progressive women. And so the Republican women that I was connecting with were just a little bit more hesitant and unsure, how they were going to be part of the film, or, they weren't feeling the kind of solidarity, rah women right. that many of the Democratic women I was connecting with were. But I really just was going through and reading about, because once you file to run for office, that information is public. So I was combing through all of the information for Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, Iowa, really anywhere I could drive within like a 6-hour radius that I could get to from Chicago, and reaching out to people, and ended up stumbling across Julie in my own backyard, and a few other people. There were a few other Republican women in the suburbs who I talked to, who were like, yeah, you really need to go meet Julie, so finally I did, and and I just was like, I'm so fascinated by you and your worldview and where you're coming from, and like, she's just one of my favorite people to talk politics with now. And I was like, maybe this isn't going to be, sustainable for a 5-hour long film that's just a conversation with me and Julie talking about politics, but I can certainly enjoy myself in the process, which is like half the goal of making a documentary, I think, or half the impetus for me with these particular women is like, I'm going to spend a lot of time with them. I have to like them. Like, I have to enjoy spending time with them. So yeah, that was how I found those 3.
Well, I want to stick with Julie for a little bit because, having the fact that she was a Republican, And, I love how you reveal this. She's going door to door, she's knocking, she's connecting with people. And then she says, and by the way, I'm Republican. And it's shut down. It's like, oh, I agree with you. I think what you're saying is really great. I'm so glad you came knocking on my door. Oh, you're Republican? See you later. And it's like she's fighting the hardest fight, it feels like.
Yeah, absolutely. And so she was out in the Chicago suburbs, and it's just a very, very liberal district. And it's a very affluent area, and the voters tend to be very engaged and informed. But kind of incredibly closed-minded in a way that was really helpful for me, as someone who identifies as being progressive. Like, it just was a really good shove out of my bubble to be standing with her, kind of, especially during that early voting stage where she was camped out in front of the polls for like a few weeks leading up to election day. And as soon as people knew that she was Republican, it was just like hate was rained down upon her. And because I was there with her, it was rained down upon me too. So I was in this weird position of being like, oh, no, but I'm one of you. Oh, no, but I don't want to be one of you if this is what you're going to say.
Right.
So it was like a very healthy experience for me, I feel. And yeah, she just really is kind of tough as nails and was able to keep pushing and say like, all right, I'm not going to connect with everyone, but I will find the people that I can connect with, and I will make moves in the way that I can make moves. And that was part of what was so interesting and appealing to me about her story.
Well, it's, a lot of the conversations that we have around my friends on the other side of the aisle, we talk about nuance. We talk about the ability to have a nuanced conversation. And she was really trying to get in there and say, let's talk about these issues. And there's a scene where she's at a hotel luncheon or breakfast of some kind, lunch. And this woman in the back who says, well, the Orientals. And I went, she didn't flinch. She did not flinch. She was, she knows that this is part of why her job is so important, is that she needs to, she really believes in the idea of small government being the platform of the Republican Party, was at one point. But she's really bought into that. Hey guys, there's a place for this, and there's a place for me in here. And just like, talk a little bit about, I'm sure there are more moments like that made it on the cutting room floor.
Yeah. Again, the thing that I love about Julie is that she just like has no trouble being like, well, I identify with this core philosophy, and that's where I am. And I don't care about the group. She doesn't really identify as being a member of the Republican Party. She's like, I am a Republican because I believe in this core philosophy. I'm not I'm not a member of the club. And so she's just always been very like independent minded about like anything that doesn't work for my philosophy, I can leave. And it's like such an analytical brain that I'm blown away, because I think we all bring so much emotion and kind of cultural baggage to like every political issue. And Julie's just like kind of takes everyone and considers it, and it's like, oh, it goes here or it goes here. I'm like, okay. But yeah, I think she feels, and I will say something that I think shifted for her just in the course of while I was filming is when we started, I'm showing up as a filmmaker with the premise, I'm making a film about women running for office. And she's like, okay, well, I guess I am a woman running for office, but I'm not running so much based on my identities. Like, I'm running because I'm the right person for this job. And like, and because I'm a good candidate. And then over the course of really filming her for that year, I think she really did kind of grow into a place of like, well, it's especially important that I do this as a woman of color, as an immigrant in this party. Like, she really was seeing firsthand all of the rooms where it's like this sea of old white men and like Julie. And so I think, over time she was like, okay, I get it. Like, I need to be here and I need to be speaking for this party. Whereas I don't think that was sort of the crusade that she went into running for office to try and do, but it felt like an important thing for her to speak to over time.
Talk about being up against it, from having to break into kind of like an old boys club. You have Bren, who is, young mother, farming community. So, and like you said, that everybody that you talked to apparently found her as your subject and said, you are the person to be the spokesperson for this. Talk a little bit more about Bren and her experience.
Yeah. So something that I loved and always enjoyed when I was driving out to Granville, I grew up in a very small town, Farmingdale, Maine, 2,000 people. And so I like really just kind of instantly connected to like the culture around Granville and just like small town politics. And so much of what I was always asking her was like trying to get at, why is running for office in a small town different than running for office in Chicago? And for her, it was like these little anecdotes, like she goes to the gym with the woman that she's running against. And so like they're not enemies or anything. Everyone gets along because it's a small town. And it's, and so there is kind of a baked in civility that is like, okay, well, you have to play nice with everyone because we all are going to bump into each other at the grocery store, like sooner or later. But it also makes for these really like entrenched power structures, I think, that are even that much more difficult to challenge. And so, I mean, it was interesting kind of dropping into Granville in that moment where right after the 2016 election, you had this group of women decide to organize into, they called it Strong Voices Rising. And it was this group of mostly moms, women in Granville who wanted to take action in these progressive and primarily local ways. So it was like this organization that had never existed really. For a while, it took me a few years of filming and a few years of editing to figure out how to frame Bryn's story. Because as a filmmaker, you're like, well, I have hundreds of hours of footage and I could tell the story in this way, or this way. And for a while I was pitching the film as like, okay, it's this moment of potential change for Granville where, you have all of these women who are organizing for the first time, and Bryn's their chosen candidate, and she could take on the patriarchy, and they're going to go head to head. And I ended up scaling back that particular lens a little bit over time because I was like, well, the energy was there, and I don't want to deny the fact that that group of women existed and really was excited about Bryn's campaign. But Bryn also won because she worked really hard, and because she had, her family had this produce farm and they've been in town forever, and she knows all the local leaders, and like, it's more complicated than all of that.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to try and represent all of those pieces with her story. But as always, there's like, there's 2 or 3 more movies that I could have made.
Well, and that's part of it is because, I thought you did a really nice job of saying, okay, there's this group, but she's the leader of this. And and really diving into her personal story. She's a mom. She's got a husband who is like supporting her the best he can. He's like, I get the glamorous jobs. It's great. And, she's also, you've got that really nice relationship with her mom and those storylines that are like, okay, so yeah, she's doing something super important. She's got the family business on her shoulders, but politics is in her heart and in her soul. And she really, she's driving this thing forward. And as she's interacting with the old boys club, oh gosh, there's a moment where one of the guys that she was on the board with says, I was going to make an off-color joke, but the Me Too movement, it's tough because you think about all of the pressures on women to, you've got to go along and you've got to try to function in this world, and then you're going to sit on this board and you've made it, but that guy's still there. And the struggle that takes. And I thought that her story in the struggle was really well done. And then on top of it, she ends up having a kid. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, you can't tell your subjects, the filmmaking participants, what to do with their lives, but it's always a lovely treat when someone's like, and I've introduced this whole other set of stakes. Like, I decided, we're having another kid, and I was like, perfect, end of the film. I don't have to worry about figuring out the end of the movie anymore. That's what it's going to be. And the last scene that involves her taking her kid to the meeting, it was like during the what was it, the polar vortex, one of the polar vortexes from like a couple of years ago, and it was literally like -10 degrees, and I'd driven out from Chicago. My car had broken down like 3 times. We couldn't get it started. My car had broken down like 3 times. I finally get out there, and she's like, my infant is like 6 weeks old, and the doctor said maybe I shouldn't take her outside because it's -10 degrees. And I was like, I just drove 6 hours. I don't want to endanger your baby. So we were just like wrapping. She's like, okay, I think we can do it if I run from the parking lot into the building and like I bundle her out. And I was like, okay, only if you feel good about this. Like, I'm so sorry. But like, yeah, God bless Bryn for being like, I know this is the end of your movie. I'll do it. I'll do it.
That's amazing. Again, the right subject, the right person to tell that story with you. I want to talk more about Maya's story because she's the youngest of the crowd, and I feel like she dove right into the deep end. Like, I'm going for mayor. Going right in. What was it like when you first met her?
Yeah, Maya just is incredibly ambitious, and I love that about her because I think women are so often kind of taught not to be so open with our ambitions. And Maya would just like go up to people and be like, well, I'm running for mayor, and then like when I turn 35, I'll run for president. Like, she's ready to like lay it out there. Yeah. And I thought that was like so important to put out unabashedly and like not censor her in that way. And the edit be like, oh no, I'm not gonna let her be like as ambitious as she is, but no, she's ambitious and she should be. I mean, I think when I first started filming, as I kind of mentioned before, it's like I connected really to where she was like in her time and place in life as well. And so I was interested in so much more than just her running for office for that first run. And I like, we just related really quickly about both the process of making a film and running for office involve a lot of similar trials and tribulations. It's like you have to raise money constantly. You're just like exhausted all the time. You wear through pairs of sneakers. Like, we were practicing, she was doing her stump speech while I was doing like my pitching of the film. And it was like, we just were kind of always in step being like, and you're in credit card debt now, and I'm in credit card debt now. And then we both paid it off and we're doing great. But like, that was just such an important part of, I think, building our relationship over those few years, was being like, yeah, I see you and I relate.
Yeah, and the credit card debt, like she went all in for this mayoral race and doesn't win. But God, couldn't even get on the ballot, which is like heartbreaking.
So frustrating. Yeah.
So frustrating. And I think a lesser person would have been like, I'm out, but she wasn't. She dealt with the debt. She found a new platform. She's like, all right, I'm going to go in here, had people rally around her, and she went back out. So she went for state rep.
Yeah. And I was like, I had no idea that's what she was planning on doing. I had always set out with the intention of filming Maya and Bryn for a year after their first election, win or lose. I was like, I want to know what that means when someone runs, even if they do lose. And then, Bryn won, so I got to film her first year of office. And then I was just ready to go along with whatever the ride was going to be for Maya for the next year. And then she was like, oh, I'm going to run again. It's like, okay, that works. And so again, I was just so enjoyed seeing all the ways that I think she like learned and grew between those campaigns as well. And I think it's important, especially with the lens of women running for office, to remind, I think women in particular can be more hesitant about running because there's a lot that you like sacrifice. There's a lot that you put on the line. And I can understand the feeling like, if I'm going to do this, I need to win. And when that's not the case, it's like, well, most candidates don't win their first race. Like, you should really be thinking of it as, here's a trial run, here's getting my name out there, here's a learning experience. Yeah. And then you have to be sort of emotionally prepared to do it again someday. And so I was glad to be able to show that again with Maya. And I hope it's a piece of the, sort of the gendered puzzle with the film as well.
Well, that's something too, not only with Maya, but with Julie. There's, they're meeting with their campaign managers, and for Julie, her campaign manager is going over, well, you need to be stronger on this talking point. And by the way, the suit color you were wearing was wrong. And I think the lipstick was too dark. And then Maya, I think you need to talk more about your personal. And she's like, no. And on one hand, it got me thinking as if I was going to be running for office, I'd like, come on, men don't get those notes. However, you've got to be part of the beast. Because unfortunately, somebody out there is looking at your lipstick color.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. And like, I think the thing that I found, it sort of took me time, again, through the course of filming and editing to identify, but like something that really unites those three women in the film, despite their like many, many differences, is that I think they're all really interested in doing this on their own terms and like bringing their full selves into this kind of political space, into a space that really isn't built for women necessarily. And for Bryn, that means like, okay, I am going to show up with my kids unapologetically, and like, and that's Bryn's thing. And Julie's like, ideologically, I need to be able to like be me. Like, I'm not going to cave and like, go this way with the Republicans or go this way with I need to like hold on to my philosophy, and she does. And with Maya, I really saw her figuring out how to like take more ownership of her narrative. And that was something, honestly, between her first campaign and her second, where she and I would talk. This coverage that she got when she was running for mayor was like, look at this young woman running, hooray. And the support that she got were all of these people who like were going to post something on Facebook and be like, wow, that's so cool, but like the tangible support wasn't there, and so she was feeling like kind of like her story was being used for a particular piece of her story, and she wasn't allowed to like be her full self and get the support that she deserved. And so those were the kind of pieces that I loved about all of these women. And I didn't even really figure out how to like articulate until way down the line. I was like, oh, that's what I love about you guys. Like, you're figuring out how to play the game when you have to, but you're still trying to make space for your full selves in a way that's going to be really impactful for anyone watching, any young women watching your campaign, all of the women who are going to follow and run after you, even if you don't win. And that just felt so important.
Speaking about young women, any of the young women that might be watching that want to become documentary filmmakers, I want to talk a little bit about how you came to documentary filmmaking.
I have two answers to that, and I'll give the snarky one first. I like saying that I'm a filmmaker out of spite, because in middle school there was like a teacher who started a film club, and it was like an invite-only film club, and I didn't get invited, so I decided I was going to go be a filmmaker to spite him. That's not the real story, right? That's not the real story.
But it plays. It plays the story.
No, I did love working in film when I was in high school, and had, like a crappy little handy cam that I made movies in my backyard, and went to college and was very much in like the fiction world. And then took one documentary class my junior year of college that I ended up filming with a woman who was a nude model, like an artistic nude model. And I accidentally sort of stumbled across her in a moment where she didn't know when I first met her, but like she was having to move out of Chicago and like give up modeling. And so what was going to be just like a 10-minute like here's a profile of what it means to be a nude model, was actually like a really sort of vulnerable moment for her, and like ended up having an actual story arc. And I felt really connected with her, and I was just like so kind of blown away that she would like trust me both to tell the story where she was emotionally vulnerable and also physically vulnerable. She like trusted this stranger to show up and like film her naked. She's like, you'll edit around what you need to edit. And I was like, I will, I promise. But I was like so hooked by that whole experience, and I loved the storytelling challenges of it. I loved the idea that you could just be like, I'm kind of curious about something, and so I can just like, that's enough of an excuse to show up, be like, can I film this thing that I would love to know more of? And so it's, yeah, documentary has just been like a great excuse for me to be nosy for a lot of years, I feel like.
That's a good one. I love it. Excuse to be nosy.
Slightly better than spite.
So, you know, I don't know. I like them both. I think they're both good. What does your team look like? I mean, a lot of times as documentary filmmakers, you're the director, the editor, the camera operator, and it sounds like you were doing a lot of that. So tell us what your team looks like.
Yeah, so I mean, mostly due to funding. We did find funding, but it was a course of like fits and starts, and a lot of it came at the end. So for the first year, I think it was really just me. Yeah, so I am the shooter and the primary editor on the film as well. And for the first year, it really was just like me going and driving to all these places. We had an $8,000 donation that ended up covering the gas, and that was like all it covered.
Yep.
And I started working with a producer that first year who, like, bless her soul, was like, yeah, I'll do deferred payments. Yeah, just an angel sent down from the heavens, which is, I like to pay people fairly and on time for the things that they do. So, and we finally have paid back our producer. So yeah, so she was kind of one of the first, members of the team, and we did build it out over the next couple of years. I got to work with a lot of talented editors, even though I was still doing the kind of bulk of the day-to-day stuff. We worked with a consulting editor, this woman, Miranda Youssef, who I loved, and I could just call and be like, I cannot solve this problem. Like, please help me figure it out. Cards on my wall with me, and like, help me push through this. And so that was like an absolutely critical lifeline. We had 2 additional editors as well, who also both stepped in at really important parts of the project. We worked with associate producers and really built out our producing team as well, because there's just so much producing that has to happen in the documentary world when it's fundraising and distribution, and just like beyond the actual day-to-day of like, oh, I have to go out and shoot something. There's just so much support that's required.
Right.
And I would say the other really important piece in there is I've sort of had a filmmaking home at Cartemquin Films in Chicago for the last few years. And so we were able to do a lot of feedback screenings, and there are co-production partners on the film. So having the executive producing support from folks like Gordon Quinn, who's always down to like sit in the edit room and work through stuff with me, like all of that stuff is so important, because otherwise documentaries, it's just like an impossible field to get into and hold all the things yourself.
Right. Oh, but it takes a team. And having the right team as well. It sounds like you have a great group around you. So excitingly for the film, you guys are going to be showing on Independent Lens. Do I have that right?
Yeah, that just came out today.
Tell us about that. Documentary filmmaker dream.
Yes. No, we're so excited, and especially like the timing is, we could not have asked for better timing. I think our slot is exactly 1 week before the election. I might be off by a day, but it's like, I mean, the dream all along was like, okay, well, we have to get it out before the election. We have to get it, we want to be part of this conversation. And so, yeah, we were just really excited to partner with Independent Lens, which is such a great program. And they were just as excited about having it be part of their, election coverage and content. So the folks there have also been really integral in like giving us feedback and working with us on the broadcast cut, which we is mostly similar to the version that's out in the world right now, but it had to come down in length a little bit. And we worked pretty extensively with their team on creative notes as well. So.
Well, I just think, when you talk about timing, we're here in the, 100th anniversary of the passage of the 19th Amendment, women getting out there, putting themselves out there. And I do want to go talk a little bit more about some of that struggle as well that these women went through, as I circle back a little bit. That Julie, not Julie, Bryn brought up, that, women, a lot of the people that she was up against, retiree, have all the time in the world, old white men. So they have the time. So what would you say from, because you did get a chance to be nosy and learn about this, from watching these women, what kind of advice would you give for someone who might see the film and feel empowered to say, I might try to run for something?
Yeah, please do. Is like number one. And really, like, I would encourage people to spend time getting to know their local offices, because I think that's what I walked away from this film in part with, like a really renewed appreciation for like the super important work that happens at the local level. And like Bryn and her co-trustees are the ones who have to make sure that like the roads get plowed. It's like all of these really basic, really fundamental community building types of roles. And so I think that there are so many roles like that people don't even know exist. And so you're like, well, if I want to run for office, maybe I'd run for a state rep or Congress, like there's kind of these giant leaps that we tend to make. And I won't discourage anyone from being ambitious, but I also think like, please, we need your time and your talents on some of these like less glamorous, less well-known positions, and you can really like gain some really valuable experience there. So I would give that as number one. But then also like what I wanted to be careful to do with Represent is, we've worked with a lot of partner organizations that do this like training in support of women, female candidates, and they watch the film and they're like, well, we love it and we think it feels really realistic, but we also don't want it to scare women away from running. I was like, I know, we're kind of walking that line where like it doesn't always look so pleasant, but it felt, again, really important to put out there and to say like, this is a film both for getting people excited to be more engaged civically and run for office if that's your thing, or volunteer with a candidate if that's your thing. But we also like really don't want to shy away from like, here are all of the systemic failings, like supporting these women like they should be. Here's, like the salary. I mean, part of what Bryn talks about there is like, yeah, she gets paid a really low salary to do this. And like, yeah, and she doesn't necessarily have the time that these retired guys have. So like, people might not necessarily think of those as being the traditional like gendered barriers, but they do still work out that way. And so I wanted to be clear about like, okay, for women who can't afford to like do this casually on the side, like this, we need to have support. We need to think about childcare. Like all of those pieces are part of those barriers as well. I feel like I went off on a tangent there, but for women thinking about running, like I hope that they would be sort of well informed about what these issues are going to be, but still just we need you. We need you to still run, and we'll try and be better. Like we'll try and be better at supporting you. And because otherwise I'm so scared for like the fate of our country.
I was, as I was watching the film, and Bryn near the end, she is in a room having to breastfeed her child, and I'm looking around that room, and even in watching the film, I'm thinking, when I saw she was pregnant, my heart sank, and like, is she gonna have to step down? Are they gonna make her step down? Because that's a reality of that. You can't be these other things as a woman. You can't have all these things. You can't have it all. You can't run for office. You can't be a good mom. All of these things. And, our time is running short, but there is my starting to cry moment in your film is when, when Bryn takes her daughters in to vote, and she says, you need to remember this moment. because it's for you. Oh, God. It's so perfect and it's beautiful. And it's like, I want those moments for more women. To get all teary-eyed here. So, I mean, I'm hoping everybody watching is like, okay, Alicia's getting all upset. You need to go watch this and clearly find out what it's about. As our time grows short, I would love you to just tell our audience why they absolutely need to sit their butts down and watch this film.
I hope that it's required viewing for anyone who feels like they have a stake in our democracy, which is everyone. Again, because I think it paints a fairly realistic picture of what this experience is like for women. So if you're not a woman, then perhaps this would be a good film to watch and learn some things. And if you are a woman, then I really hope that you see something in your experience reflected, and that it calls you to, again, really up your level of civic engagement. There's not like a sexier way to say that, but yeah, we can all do more than just voting or than just reading news articles and kind of sharing on Facebook. And this issue of gender disparity really doesn't go away without like each of us playing our part. So I think if representation, if equity and parity are things that are important to you, then I hope this is the film that you watch.
And where can people connect with you after watching the film?
We have a website. We have social media stuff. Would it be easier if I put it in the chat?
Drop it right in the chat. So that way everyone can grab it and see it. Of course, they can follow along and with the Woods Hole Film Festival and find you there as well.
Mm-hmm. There it is.
There it is. Perfect. So for everybody watching, the film is Represent. We have award-winning filmmaker Hilary Bachelder with us. We've had a wonderful conversation. You can watch the film Represent until August 3rd now. Yay, it's been extended. You can watch the film online, and then after you watch it, you're going to tell all of your friends to tune in to watch it on Independent Lens later. Oh, and something else I want to remind you, we have an after party with the Crooked Coast on Facebook. So, go grab a drink, come back, hang out with the Crooked Coast. Hilary, thank you so much for the film. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you again for this conversation. It was really lovely talking.